In 1996, Bantam asked if Michael A. Stackpole could write a new 4-book set of X-Wing books, but unfortunately Stackpole had previous time commitments and could only agree to 1 book. Instead, he recommended Aaron Alston for the other 3 books because he thought that Alston's writing style was similar to his own. By 1998, Alston had written 6 fantasy and sci-fi novels, and he was also a game designer of role-playing games. Wraith Squadron made it to number 10 on the New York Times paperback bestseller list for the week of March 1st, 1998, and was ultimately on the list for 2 weeks. Now, I love Aaron Alston's X-Wing books, but usually when I'm rereading them, I skip Wraith Squadron and jump right into Iron Fist and Solo Command, so it was fun to actually start with the first book in the series and see what I remembered, which was mostly the origins of Lieutenant Ketch, and what I'd forgotten, which was most of the plot. So, a brief summary. Wedge Antilles has a bold new idea. Take all the rejects and cast-off pilots and put them together to form a covert action unit of X-Wings. But before Wraith Squadron can even finish their training, their base is attacked by Admiral Trigget, and they're forced to strike a new path, commandeering and impersonating one of Warlord Zinj's ships. So after all the great successes that Wedge Antilles had in restarting Rogue Squadron, he's not willing to rest on his laurels. Oh no, he has a new idea and he wants to start an all-new squadron. But unlike with the Rogues, Wedge isn't really buddy-buddy with them, more so than in the Rogue Squadron books. He's finding that he has to be the adult among a group of, I guess, younger adults. As Wedge complains in the book, though, he's only 28. So most of Wedge's plotline involves him having to be the boss, having to give people directions, having to reprimand people, which is fine. It's just a lot of what we've seen from Wedge before. But what I really liked was how Wedge dealt with Jesmyn Akbar's death, and specifically how he wrote the letter that had to go to her uncle. Everyone feels really bad about Jesmyn's death, Kell Tainer especially, but Wedge is the one that has to write a letter letting Admiral Akbar know that his niece is dead. He struggles with it. We see his initial attempts, and then we also get to see the final letter that he sends, which is professional, but also really kind. So I liked getting to see that side of Wedge, not just Boss Wedge, Officer Wedge, but Wedge who, because of his position, has to do the really hard things. We also get the return of another canon character, Wes Janson, who notably was Wedge's gunner during the Battle of Hoth. He appeared in Stackpole's Rogue Squadron comic, but we haven't really seen him in the books until this moment, so it was nice to see Wes again. He takes over as Wraith Squadron's executive officer, but compared to Wedge, he's pretty much comic relief. His biggest conflict that he faces is that he had to kill Kell Tainer's father. So Kell holds a lot of fear and hatred towards Wes, but Wes just sort of approaches it in a very lackadaisical manner. There's just this running joke of he just keeps telling Wedge, he can make bombs, you know, and I felt like, other than the initial explanation that Wes gave, we didn't really get to see a lot of nuance in his character, and all that was dealt with on Kell's side of things. And then we've also got loads of new Wraiths to meet and learn about. There's a lot of setup in this book, and the characters can tend to fall into stock types. But I do feel like some of the characters Alston does develop beyond just their archetype, which I liked. I really liked Tyria. She has force potential. Luke Skywalker has essentially inspected her, tested her, and didn't think she was worth training. So there's this conflict running through her that's basically she knows that she has this force ability, she has trouble using it, she almost doesn't even want to use it and acknowledge it. But her force skill does help them out multiple times. Her intuition, or what she calls intuition, is the force. It's sort of what Zahn is talking about in the Hand of Thrawn duology, where guidance from the force is maybe even more important than sheer power. And so we get to see Tyria getting these inklings of things, either understanding a situation better than anyone else or getting a sense of danger, things like that, which really help the Wraiths out. Then we also have Garrick Loran, the Face, who was a child actor for the Empire and left them, joined the rebellion, and now he's in Wraith Squadron. In this book, we see a lot of instances of Face's acting ability because he is both the man behind the green screen for their Captain Derillian facade, but then he also has to pretend to be another Imperial crewman, Lieutenant Neril, in other instances where obviously Captain Derillian can't be there in person. And he's got some good moments where he has to improv or where he doesn't have information and he just has to wing it. But being an actor, he's perfectly fine winging it. Just whether his improvisations will be successful or not, it really depends on the scenario. We have Myn Donos, the sole surviving member of Talon's squadron, who goes through some stuff. Was able to kill Admiral Trigget, so he feels a lot better in the end, but I know from experience that he'll go through even more stuff in the next 2 books. And sort of our Corran surrogate this time around, the character that Alston spends the most time in his head, is Kell Tainer, originally of Alderaan, but his family moved, fortunately, before its destruction. He has, as I said before, this animosity towards Lieutenant Janson that takes almost the whole book for him to work through. He has always built up Wes as like this boogeyman in his head, like you do something wrong and Janson's gonna kill you. And even when he's in the squadron and has met him, he still is worried about that. But it takes him finding out that Wedge and Wes know about Myn Donos' condition, that after the loss of his astromech, that he's sort of gone almost catatonic, that they know what's going on and they're gonna wait for him to get better before they report it. Makes him realize that, no, Janson's not this evil, cackling villain. He had a hard choice put to him years ago, and like it or not, he had to do what he had to do, so he's able to accept that. What I thought really interesting about Kell, though, is that he almost inherited his father's anxiety disorder, I guess. Alston doesn't call it an anxiety disorder, but it feels like that to me, that in intense situations, mostly in battles, Kell almost just clamps up and he can't do anything and he can't make a decision and he can't breathe and he just runs away. Literally, in the final battle, he runs away. Runt leaves him there, heads back to the battle, and it takes Kell realizing that people could die because he's not there to turn him around, which works, but I'm not sure how realistic that is for me. An anxiety problem like that is really hard to get over, and I'm not sure that positive thinking is enough to vanquish it, especially because by the end, it seems like Kell thinks that he's not going to have this problem anymore, which not sure I buy that. But with us spending so much time in especially Kell's head, I felt like some of the other wraiths didn't get as fleshed out. So we have loads of them. We have Vort, aka Piggy, the Gamorrean, who will get more of a role to play in the next 2 books, but for now is just an Imperial experiment who's now very smart. Not sure how I feel about his nickname being Piggy. He doesn't feel that's derogative, and Wedge and Wes think it's a nice nod to Jack Porkins, but I wasn't as keen on a Gamorrean who's literally a pig alien being called Pig. We get Phelan from Tatooine, whose main trait is that she's angry and she talks back. We have Grinder the Bothan, who's their slicer, and his main trait is that he says he doesn't like practical jokes, but he does a lot of them. We have Runt, Kell's wingman, who has multiple personalities, but he's getting better at it. Then there's Ton Fanon, their doctor, who is very snarky and sarcastic. He also seems like too much of a risk as a pilot because he's constantly crashing. I would argue that what happened to his first X-Wing was not his fault because they got hit by one of those mines. But then he gets a new X-Wing, also loses that one in the end of this battle, and loses his spleen. But that made me laugh where he told them that he got so angry he had to vent his spleen. And then we have Jesmin Akbar. Rogue Squadron also had an initial death that was supposed to bring the team together. And I actually like how Alston does it in Wraith Squadron better because Jesmin's death is all the more shocking because they're trying to prevent it. It's not like where Lou Jane was killed and we didn't find out till afterwards. We're there when Jesmin dies. We're there when Kell is trying everything he possibly can to save her. He's running his ship into hers to get it out of that spin, and he just can't. And she dies. And all the Wraiths feel awful about it, but you too, as the reader, feel awful about it because we see her death and we see how hard they try to stop it. And I think it makes it even worse that she doesn't die fighting Imperials. She dies when stupid pirates attack them. So while it did, in a way, bring the Wraiths together, it just also felt like such a loss. Which is funny because I felt like I didn't really get to know her character other than that one conversation she had with her uncle, where she said that because of her name, she wasn't really allowed to go on real missions, and she just wanted to make a difference for once. Beyond that, she laughed at Face's jokes, but that was it. But that one conversation, her death, just for me made her character worth it. On the other hand, the other two deaths we get at the end of Phelan and Grinder just didn't feel as emotional to me, maybe because they were much more of archetypes compared to some of the more fleshed out characters like Face or Kell or Tyria. And the fact that they both died pretty much at the same time, I was just like, shoot, this isn't going well, but I didn't feel anything beyond that. And then we have our bad guys. Warlord Zinn just sort of taking the Isard role in this book, that he's behind the scenes, manipulating things, putting things in place, but we don't see him a lot. Who then comes to the forefront as our main bad guy is Admiral Trigget. He attacks the base where Wraith Squadron and the other New Republic groups are based. Fortunately, they're able to get almost everyone out. And then they attempt to lure him into a trap, and then actually lure him into a trap. And he's so self-serving that he's willing to sacrifice his entire Star Destroyer, which has 35,000 crewmen, to get away. So yeah, I was glad when Crespin and Donos were able to take him out because he's just, selfish guy. We also meet Gara Petithel from Coruscant, who is the spy who, undercover in the New Republic, leaked the information that killed all of Talon's squadron except for Myn Donos. She gets away at the end, and we will see a lot more of her in the next two books. So I really like Aaron Alston's X-Wing books, but reading Wraith Squadron this time around, I did note a few issues I had. Number one is that because it's the first book in a series, there is setup. And after having had to wade through setup in Rogue Squadron, setup in all the other trilogies I've read thus far, and just 2 books ago, setup in Spectre the Past, I'm getting a little tired of setup. I'll be glad when I can jump into books 2 and 3, and then jump into the other 2 X-Wing books that came out in 1999, because at that point, hallelujah, there won't be a lot of setup. I also found that Alston has a lot more humorous moments than Stackpole did. A lot of them work for me, but not all of them did. And I think your mileage may vary as a reader whether you really connect with Alston's voice, because yeah, there are a lot more jokes. Some of them are dumb, some of them are funny, so I'm not sure if they would work for every reader. And while I thought he had a very readable style, there were some bits where the order of words was wrong, so I got thrown out of reading. It was almost like I had to stop and reread the sentence and be like, I would have put those words in a different order. I've found a lot of times when I personally am writing things that after I write them down, I like to read them out loud because that will really catch the parts that sound weird. And I feel like that was these things. The parts that when you read them out loud, you go, that's a weird phrasing. Alston also, for most of the battle scenes, calls the Wraiths by their call signs, not their names. That's probably very realistic for how a battle would actually be, but it turns out that I am not good at remembering which number goes with which Wraith. So sometimes reading it, I was just like, which one is that again? And I know that there's a Dramatese Purse name in the beginning, and I could keep flipping back to that, but I don't like doing that. 9 of the Wraiths, I can't consistently remember their call sign, and that came back to bite me in the butt, especially in the final battles. I also was really excited by the prospect of the rogues masquerading as the Nightcaller's crew, but I felt like that lost a little oomph in the actual execution. So that their deception is not discovered, the Wraiths are just following the itinerary that was previously set for the Nightcaller by Warlord Zinj. What that means is there was a lot of repetition and sort of a formula that Alston was following where the Nightcaller jumps into a system, either face as Captain Durillion or face as Lieutenant Gnarl, talks to prominent people there, they scout stuff out, they leave the system, and then either New Republic intelligence or the Wraiths themselves go in and sabotage stuff. Which, fair enough. Makes sense, it's a good plan. It just felt a little old after a while, and I wanted to see it get mixed up a little more. But on the whole, I would say that Wraith Squadron is funny and pretty exciting. And I liked getting to know the Wraiths again. And even though there was setup, it's setup that I know and hope will pay off in the next 2 books. So I could suffer through it, especially for some pretty fun undercover missions and space battles in the end. So next time I will be finishing out the Han Solo prequel trilogy by A.C. Crispin with Rebel Dawn.